When the Allies used captured Nazi tech, the secret trials of the Me-262 jet fighter. The scent of burnt oil and damp earth clung to the air over the sprawling German airfield. Allied ground troops, a mix of seasoned GIs and fresh-faced privates, moved with a wary purpose. The war in Europe was a dying beast, but its final convulsions were still deadly. Ahead, a vast hangar, its corrugated iron skin scarred by shrapnel, loomed like a dormant titan. Inside, the prize awaited. Sergeant Miller, his M1 Garand held loosely, nudged Private Jenkins forward. "Keep your eyes peeled, kid. Don't touch anything until the eggheads get here." Jenkins, barely out of basic, nodded, his gaze wide. This wasn't the kind of enemy they'd trained for. This was something futuristic. They entered the hangar. The space was cavernous, surprisingly intact save for a few jagged holes in the roof. Dust motes danced in the shafts of weak sunlight that pierced the gloom. And there it was, not one, but several. Sleek, menacing, unlike anything Miller had ever seen. The Messerschmitt Me-262 Schwalbe. One of them was relatively undamaged, its distinctive swept wings and twin-engine nacelles catching the meager light. German markings were still visible on its fuselage, but fresh Allied stencils, captured enemy aircraft, had been hastily applied. A group of engineers and intelligence officers, distinguishable by their cleaner uniforms and intense expressions, were already swarming another airframe, their voices hushed, almost reverent. Major Peterson, his uniform creased from days in the field, stood by the most intact Me-262, a map case tucked under his arm. He ran a gloved hand along its smooth, metal skin. "Look at this, Davies. No propellers. Just these pots." He gestured to the engine nacelles. Dr. Davies, a civilian aeronautical engineer from right field, adjusted his spectacles, his eyes alight with a barely contained excitement. "Major, these aren't just pots. These are Jumo 004 turbojets. German ingenuity at its most terrifying. This is the future, right here." He pulled a small notebook from his pocket, already scribbling furiously. "Axial flow compressors, multiple combustion chambers. The metallurgy alone will be a revelation." Another engineer, Lieutenant Schmidt, approached, wiping grease from his hands with a rag. "Sir, we've found some preliminary schematics. Crude, handwritten, but they confirm our suspicions. The operational envelope? It's beyond anything we currently have in service." Peterson's brow furrowed. "Beyond? How far beyond?" Schmidt consulted a dog-eared document. "Cruising speed estimated at 800 kilometers per hour. Nearly 500 miles per hour, Major. Top speed, even higher. Our P-51s are barely hitting 440. Miller, overhearing, felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cool hangar air. He'd fought against these things. He'd seen how they'd vanished into the blue, leaving propeller planes in their dust. Now he was standing next to one. It felt like touching a ghost. A grizzled British intelligence officer, Captain Thorne, joined them, a cigarette dangling from his lips. "Bloody marvelous, isn't it? Our chaps have been reporting these mystery planes for months. Now we know what they were up against." He pointed to a panel near the cockpit. "Any luck getting inside, Davies?" Davies shook his head. "The canopy's locked tight, and we don't want to force it. We need to preserve every detail. We're waiting for the specialists from Watson's Whizzers. They're en route." "Watson's Whizzers," Thorne grunted, taking a drag. "More Yanks coming to collect the best bits. Fair enough, I suppose. It's too big a prize to share carelessly." He eyed the jet again. "The Germans were ahead, weren't they? In this, at least." Peterson nodded slowly. "They were desperate, Thorne. Desperation breeds innovation. And this is their last, desperate gasp of genius." He walked closer to the Me-262's nose, observing the four gaping muzzles of its 30mm cannons. "Imagine the shock of seeing this bearing down on you. They really wanted to win, didn't they?" Jenkins, still standing guard, watched the specialists with a mix of awe and trepidation. The war was ending, but the game was just beginning. This German jet, silent and still, was whispering secrets of a new era. An era of speed, power, and perhaps, even greater conflict. The scramble for Rechlin was just the prelude to a far larger, global race. The cargo ship, a battered Liberty freighter repurposed for sensitive military payloads, groaned under the weight of its strange cargo. Below deck, in cavernous holds usually reserved for tanks and trucks, lay the dissected remains of several Me-262s. Wings carefully detached, fuselages crated, engines secured in heavy wooden frames. Each piece was a puzzle part, tagged and numbered with meticulous precision. Colonel Harold E. Watson, a man whose easy smile belied a razor-sharp intellect, surveyed the hold with a critical eye. His team, Watson's Whizzers, had performed surgical extractions on the jets across Germany, often under the very noses of still active enemy pockets. Now, the most prized specimens were bound for the U.S., specifically Wright Field. "Captain, ensure those crates are lashed down tight," Watson instructed a naval officer. "One rogue wave, and we lose years of research." The captain, a burly man named O'Malley, nodded. "Don't you worry, Colonel. This isn't our first rodeo with sensitive cargo. But I gotta say, these German birds. They look like something out of a Buck Rogers comic." Watson chuckled. "They are, Captain. They truly are. And we need to understand every last rivet." He walked over to a crate containing a Jumo 004 engine. Its sleek, powerful lines were still evident, even in pieces. "This, O'Malley, is the real prize. The heart of the beast." Across the ocean, at Farnborough in the UK, a similar scene was unfolding. Engineers of the Royal Aircraft Establishment, RAE, had secured their own Me-262 samples. Dr. Eleanor Vance, a brilliant metallurgist, donned a pair of heavy gloves, examining a turbine blade. "The thermal stresses on these must have been astronomical," she murmured to her colleague, Dr. Richard Graves. "Look at the grain structure. It suggests some remarkable high-temperature alloys, probably nickel and cobalt rich, but with some clever substitutions. Resource scarcity driving innovation." Graves, an aerodynamicist, peered over her shoulder. "Indeed, but it's the airframe itself that intrigues me. That swept wing. The Germans claimed it was for stability, but our own early supersonic theory. It hints at something more. Could they have stumbled onto something significant for high-speed flight?" He pointed to a large blueprint unrolled on a nearby table, a schematic of the Me-262's wing. "The leading edge angle. It's subtle, but it's there. A delaying factor for compressibility effects. If they truly understood that, it changes everything." Back on the Liberty ship, Watson was reviewing manifests with Lieutenant Miller, his lead engineer. "Are we certain about the fuel requirements, Miller? I don't want to get these things to Wright Field only to find we can't even start them." Miller consulted a thick binder filled with captured German documents, hastily translated. "High-octane jet fuel, Colonel. J2, to be precise, or something similar. We've managed to synthesize a small batch based on the specifications. It's a precise mix, highly volatile." "Volatile," Watson repeated, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Just like the war they were designed to fight." He stared out at the gray Atlantic. The journey was long, perilous, and full of unknowns. Every wave that crashed over the bow felt like a test, a challenge to their resolve. He knew that simply getting the planes to Allied soil was just the beginning. The real work, the meticulous dissection, the dangerous test flights, the painstaking reverse engineering, was yet to come. The ghost of the Luftwaffe was crossing the ocean, not to terrorize, but to reveal its most guarded secrets. And in those secrets lay the blueprint for the next generation of air power. The price of understanding would be paid in countless hours of tireless work, and perhaps, in the lives of the brave men who would dare to fly these captured marvels. Part 3. The first Allied flights, taming the unruly swallow. Approximately 25,000 characters. Scenario focused on the initial test flights, the pilot's experience in the cockpit, and the immediate technical discoveries and dangers. The tarmac at Wright Field shimmered under the Ohio sun. A crowd of engineers, military brass, and a handful of select test pilots stood at a respectful distance, their eyes fixed on the sleek, gray aircraft. The German markings had been overpainted, replaced by the stark white star of the USAAF. This was FE 610, the most pristine of the captured Me-262s. Major Robert Bob Hoover, a seasoned test pilot with nerves of steel, adjusted his helmet. He'd flown everything the Allies had to offer, but this was different. This was the enemy's best, and it was temperamental. He'd studied the translated flight manuals, interviewed captured Luftwaffe pilots, and walked around the jet countless times. He knew its quirks, its dangers, and its immense potential. Colonel Watson gave Hoover a thumbs up from the edge of the runway. Hoover returned it, a grim smile on his face. He climbed into the cockpit, the canopy closing with a solid thud. The interior was Spartan, functional. German gauges stared back at him, their labels translated and stickered. He followed the start-up sequence, a complex ballet of switches and levers, the Jumo 004 engines whirring to life with a high-pitched whine that escalated into a powerful roar. The vibration was different, more guttural than any piston engine he'd ever experienced. Right tower, FE 610 ready for takeoff, Hoover's voice crackled over the radio, calm and professional. FE 610, cleared for takeoff. Good luck, Major. He advanced the throttles, gently. The acceleration was unlike anything he'd ever felt. It wasn't the violent kick of a propeller plane, it was a smooth, relentless surge. The runway rushed beneath him, and then, with a light touch on the stick, the Me-262 lifted effortlessly into the sky. Incredible, Hoover muttered to himself, the words barely audible over the engine noise. The ground fell away astonishingly fast. He retracted the landing gear, the thud resonating through the airframe. He climbed, feeling the raw power of the twin jets. The airspeed indicator climbed steadily. 300, 350, 400 miles per hour. The familiar sounds of air rushing past the canopy were replaced by a new, almost silent flow, a testament to the jet's aerodynamic purity. But then came the challenge. He attempted a rapid throttle adjustment, a maneuver essential for combat. Instantly, the right engine coughed, sputtered, and died. A chilling silence. Flameout. Right engine flameout, Hoover reported, his voice now laced with urgency. He fought the sudden yaw, the aircraft trying to roll. His training kicked in. He initiated the restart procedure, a delicate dance with fuel levers and igniters, all while maintaining speed and altitude. After what felt like an eternity, the Jumo 004 sputtered back to life, roaring once more. He broke into a sweat. Bloody unreliable, he cursed under his breath. The German pilots had truly been on a knife edge. This wasn't just flying, it was a constant battle with the machine itself. Back on the ground, Dr. Davies and Lieutenant Miller had tracked the incident. Throttle surge, Davies observed, his face grim. Precisely as the German documents warned. Those early axial flow compressors are incredibly sensitive to rapid airflow changes. Miller scribbled notes. It means combat maneuvers at low altitude or with quick power changes are extremely risky. A definite tactical weakness, despite the speed. Hoover continued his flight, now with extreme caution, testing low-speed handling, high G turns, and the notoriously tricky landing approach. The swept wings, while great for speed, made the aircraft less stable at low speeds, prone to a sudden, unforgiving stall. The powerful dive brakes and drag chute were essential for controlling its descent and stopping it on the runway. As he finally brought FE 610 down for a flawless landing, deploying the drag chute with a billow of white silk, a cheer went up from the observers. He taxied back, the engines winding down, leaving an eerie silence. Stepping out of the cockpit, Hoover felt a surge of exhaustion, but also exhilaration. He had flown the Ghost. He had touched the future. She's a hell of a bird, he told Watson, wiping sweat from his brow. Fast as lightning, but she demands respect. And she'll try to kill you if you don't give it. The first Allied flights confirmed everything and more. The Me-262 was a triumph of engineering, but also a raw, untamed beast. Taming it would be a dangerous, arduous process, but the information gained was invaluable. The Allies were now truly inside the mind of their enemy's most advanced weapon. Years later, the Korean sky was a canvas for a new kind of aerial ballet. The piercing howl of jet engines dominated the soundscape, a stark contrast to the familiar roar of propeller planes just a few years prior. American F-86 Sabres, with their distinctive swept wings, clashed with Soviet-built MiG-15s, equally sleek and agile. The ghost of the Me-262 was everywhere. General Robert Bob Hoover, now a celebrated test pilot and instructor, watched footage of the dogfights in a dimly lit briefing room. He saw the same characteristics he'd felt years ago in FE 610. The speed, the high G turns, the unforgiving nature of jet combat. "Look at that saber," Hoover pointed to the screen, where an F-86 executed a tight turn. "That wing sweep, that's pure Me-262 DNA right there. The Germans might not have fully grasped why it worked so well, but we did. And so did the Soviets." Dr. Davies, now a senior aerospace advisor, sat beside him. "Indeed, General, our metallurgical analysis of the Jumo 004 engines also accelerated our own turbine blade research. And the sheer audacity of the German concept, it pushed us to think bigger, faster." He recalled the intense debriefings at Wright Field, the mountains of data analyzed, the endless debates about axial versus centrifugal flow engines. The Me-262, for all its flaws, had proven the viability of the jet fighter concept beyond doubt. The MiG-15, of course, Davies continued, showed how aggressively the Soviets absorbed German technology. Their own Operation Osoviekim was as comprehensive as lusty. They didn't just get captured German engineers, they got entire factories, blueprints, and even some complete jets. Hoover nodded. So, in a strange way, the Me-262 taught both sides how to fight the next war. It was the unwitting architect of Cold War air superiority. Across the Atlantic, at a quiet British airbase, Dr. Eleanor Vance, now heading a metallurgy department, held a polished turbine blade from a newly developed Rolls-Royce jet engine. The alloy composition, while vastly superior to the German wartime materials, still bore the faint echoes of the Jumo 004. She remembered the cramped labs at Farnborough, the tireless hours spent dissecting every component of the captured Me-262s. The Germans had, under immense pressure, pioneered high-temperature metallurgy and innovative aerodynamic solutions that had been considered theoretical impossibilities just years before. "We learned that desperation can be a powerful catalyst," Vance mused to a junior engineer. "They had to do more with less. And in doing so, they showed us what was truly possible." The Me-262s that survived the Allied trials, battered but historically priceless, were eventually retired to museums. One, restored to its former glory, stood in the vast hall of the National Museum of the United States Air Force. Its sleek lines, once a symbol of terror, now represented a crossroads in aviation history. A young visitor, captivated, stared at the powerful engines. "It looks so old, but so fast," they remarked to their parent. "It was the fastest plane in the world, once," the parent replied, "and it changed everything." Hoover, visiting the museum years later, stood before FE 610. He remembered the shudder of the flameout, the exhilarating surge of speed, the feeling of wrestling a dangerous, beautiful machine. The Me-262 was more than just a captured aircraft, it was a tangible link between two eras of flight. It was the ultimate prize of World War II, a testament to how the spoils of scientific warfare could dictate the shape of conflicts yet to come. The Swallow had flown, and echoes would resonate through the skies for decades, shaping the very definition of modern air power. The secret trials were over, but the legacy of the Nazi jet fighter had truly just begun. A muddy, heavily guarded rail yard outside Prague, Czechoslovakia. Snow is melting, turning the ground to slush. Several disassembled Me-262 airframes lie stacked on flatbed railcars, mixed with crates of machine tools and schematics. The air is tense. Soviet soldiers and engineers, bundled in heavy greatcoats, work quickly under the watchful eyes of NKVD officers. "Faster. We lose light. Ensure every crate is sealed and double-tagged. Not a single blueprint is to be misplaced. These are the keys to tomorrow." "We are working." The Germans were thorough, even in retreat. "We found the complete jig for the nose section in a coal bunker near the factory. They tried to bury it." A gloved hand brushes the metallic surface of a Jumo 004 engine. "These Junkers engines. The Americans and British prattle on about their Gloucester and Lockheed jets. Amateur efforts. This German design, axial flow, this is power. This is the path to true speed. We must master the Jumo, not just copy it. We must find its material secret. We have the metallurgists ready. They're already establishing a provisional lab outside Moscow. Their initial reports are fascinating. The Germans achieved these high internal temperatures through incredible compromises. Compromises? Explain. They substituted materials, ceramics and low-grade steels where they should have used expensive nickel alloys. But for the vital turbine blades, the parts that spin at 10,000 revolutions and face intense heat, they used every scrap of the best alloys they had. It's a study in strategic resource management. A desperate move, but a stroke of genius. So their engine was both brilliant and fragile. A perfect reflection of the Reich itself. We take the brilliance, and we fix the fragility with Soviet resources. This technology will jump us 5 years ahead of the Americans. Send a coded message to Tupolev and Mikoyan. The Me-262 is the foundation of the next Soviet fighter. There to study every detail. In a sophisticated laboratory at Farnborough, the hum of machines fills the air. Engineers run stress tests on a captured German turbine blade, glowing red hot under immense pressure. Temperature approaching 800 degrees Celsius. Note the creep deformation. It's failing faster than our British mnemonic alloys would, but look at the sustained performance. The grain boundaries are holding, despite the lower nickel content. The German technique of investment casting with those specific cooling ratios, that's the trick. They found a way to squeeze extraordinary performance from mediocre resources. It's the heat barrier, not the sound barrier, that limits performance. The Germans ran their engines right up to the metallurgical limit of their materials. We have better alloys, but their method of cooling and stress distribution is invaluable. We can push our engines even further using these principles. The Americans are moving fast. They've already modified the Me-262 design for their F-86 project. They're openly discussing the German sweep in design meetings. They focus on how fast, not why. The speed of progress often eclipses caution. We must absorb the lessons, not just the technology. The Me-262's low speed handling was treacherous. Its engines were a ticking clock. If the Americans focus only on speed, they risk inheriting the flaws. That raises the ethical point. We are reverse engineering technology conceived by a regime built on conquest. This jet was likely built with forced labor. Are we validating and extending their legacy? We are validating the laws of physics. The Me-262 is a machine. Its technology belongs to the future, not to any ideology. We use it to build safer, better aircraft. That's our responsibility. The alternative is letting the next war be fought with someone else's superior technology. Thousands of miles away, in a dimly lit Wright Field office, photographs of captured facilities cover the table. The rocketry, the atomic research, the U-boat designs, it's overwhelming. But nothing captured the imagination like the Me-262. Because we can fly it. You can't fly a V-2, not yet. The jet is immediate, tangible. It defines the next fight. You flew it, you felt it. Tell me honestly, if the Germans had perfected that engine, if they had solved the heat barrier we keep talking about, could they have changed the outcome of the Battle of the Bulge? They could have crippled the air campaign against their industry. They had the speed to dictate the fight. The engine's fragility was our true ally. Not our planes, not our pilots, the Jumo 04's short lifespan. Then our job is clear. We take that fragility and turn it into reliability. We take their speed and turn it into stability. The race isn't against the defunct Luftwaffe anymore, it's against the clock and against the Soviets. This single plane has redrawn the map of aerospace power. The secret trials were just the beginning of the great technological arms race. The design office in California buzzed with tension and cigarette smoke. Drafting tables overflowed with blueprints of a new machine, the Na-140, soon to become the F-86 Sabre. The engineers were deep in debate, voices sharp and clipped over the hum of ceiling fans. We need confirmation on the leading edge sweep. Our wind tunnel data suggests 35 degrees is optimal for maintaining lift at high subsonic speeds while delaying the critical Mach number. But it's a huge commitment. Are we betting everything on a German hunch? It's more than a hunch. We have confirmed flight data from the Me-262, airframe FE-610. The Germans were limited by their production methods, but their discovery was sound. Even a minimal sweep of 18.5 degrees gave dramatic improvements over straight wings. 35 degrees, combined with our new axial engine, is the breakthrough we need. It's the only way to beat what the Soviets are building. And the high-lift devices? The German design used those leading-edge slats, crude, but effective for slowing the jet on landing. The slats are essential. The swept wing sacrifices low-speed handling for high-speed performance. Without slats, the Sabre will kill its pilots on approach. We integrate them immediately. It's a direct evolution from the Me-262, improved with our hydraulics and precision manufacturing. Fresh intelligence arrived from the Soviet zones. Reports confirmed their early jet fighters, the MiG-15, were using an even steeper wing sweep, paired with a powerful engine derived from British designs. "The Cold War is already flying," one engineer muttered. "We're staring at the first technological proxy war." The F-86 and the MiG-15, two jets, both born from the Me-262's legacy. The same German ghost, guiding two opposing hands. In a massive warehouse in Indiana, the remaining Me-262 airframes sat in rows under dim light. The last ones were being archived. Each rivet and wing panel was catalogued and crated with care. "Handle that rudder assembly carefully. That plane's going to a museum. It's done its duty." What was its duty? Someone asked quietly. To show us how the Germans lost? No, came the answer. To teach us how to win the next fight. We flew it, measured it, broke it down to its smallest parts, and learned from it. That plane is worth more than a dozen divisions. It gave us the starting line for the jet age. A hand brushed against the cold turbine casing of a disassembled Jumo 004 engine. The fragility was the key. The engineering was magnificent, but the regime that built it was self-destructing. We succeeded because our scientists could speak freely and share openly. The technology of tyranny is always brittle. Far to the south, under the blistering New Mexico sun, a new generation of jet stood gleaming on the tarmac. The F-86 Sabre, sleek and modern, waited for its test flight. All checks complete? No surprises? Clean as a whistle. She's stable, reliable, everything the Schwalbe wasn't. The test pilot nodded and climbed into the cockpit. Years of work, of risk, of studying captured machines had led to this moment. Sabre 1, ready for takeoff. Cleared for flight, Sabre 1. Go get him. The engine roared, a deep, steady thunder that drowned out the desert. The jet surged forward, accelerating faster than any piston aircraft ever could. The thrust pressed him deep into his seat. The swept wings cut the air cleanly, no hesitation, no fear of flameout, no tremble of weakness. The aircraft climbed, slicing through the sky with a steady confidence. High above the desert, the pilot thought silently to himself. The ghost is dead, long live the successor. The F-86 disappeared into the endless blue, carrying with it the perfected lessons of a defeated enemy. The secret trials of the Me-262 were a success, not in flying the German jet, but in taming its brilliance. The fragile power of the Third Reich had been transformed into the stable supremacy of the new age. The Me-262 had flown its final mission, to design the future. The vast interior of the National Air Museum in Washington was silent except for the soft echo of footsteps. Hanging high above the polished floor was a machine that had once terrified Allied pilots, the Messerschmitt Me-262 Schwalbe. Its twin engines hung like relics of another age, its wings frozen in a moment of perfect, dangerous grace. To the visitors below, it looked almost elegant. To those who had studied it, it was something more, a reminder of how close humanity had come to letting science outpace morality. An older man, gray-haired but sharp-eyed, guided a group of young engineers through the hall. His voice carried the calm authority of someone who had lived through the story he was telling. "Look at her carefully," he said, gesturing upward. "She's not just a war trophy. She's our technological ancestor. Every jet you've worked on owes her something, design, concept, or philosophy." The younger engineers moved closer, examining the sleek metal. One of them pointed to the nacelles, the smooth housings for the engines. "It's hard to believe this crude design led to everything we have now," she said. "The combustion chambers look primitive, almost fragile." "Simple," he replied, "but revolutionary. The Jumo 004 didn't survive long, its lifespan was measured in single-digit hours. But it introduced a new truth: thrust density. It taught us how to concentrate power and control it. We didn't copy the German engine. We took its principle and perfected it with better materials, better alloys, and open collaboration. That's what made all the difference. They walked around the aircraft, pausing at the wings. The sweep, another engineer murmured, the unintentional gift. Unintentional, the older man agreed, but profound. The Germans added sweep to balance the heavy engines. They didn't even realize they were touching the sound barrier. We refined that idea, turned it into the backbone of supersonic flight. The F-86 proved it, the MiG-15 confirmed it, and every fighter after that carries its DNA. The swept wing was born out of desperation, and became the symbol of control. In a glass case nearby lay a small, twisted fragment of metal, the remains of a turbine blade. It was dull and burned, marked by the struggle of heat and time. This, the guide said softly, is where the real battle was fought, not in the skies, but in the metals. The Germans showed us how far materials could be pushed. Their failures taught us what was possible. From this, we developed alloys that power commercial airliners and space shuttles. Every flight today, whether civilian or military, carries a fragment of this history. The young engineers listened in silence. The war was long over, but its machines still whispered lessons about brilliance, fragility, and ambition. The Me-262 was more than a jet, he continued. It was a mirror. It reflected what science can achieve when it's unbound by ethics, and what we must learn to do differently. It forced us, and our rivals, into the jet age years before we were ready. That pressure made us innovate, but it also made us question the price of progress. He looked up once more at the suspended aircraft, its shadow stretching across the museum floor. It was the key to Operation Lusty, the single greatest capture in aviation history. It didn't just change how we fought, it changed how we thought. This machine was the moment the rules of war and the rules of physics collided. He turned to the young faces around him. When we flew it, we weren't just studying an enemy's weapon. We were decoding the future. And once we understood it, we could never go back. Silence filled the hall again, but it wasn't the silence of emptiness, it was reverence. Above them, the Me-262 hung still, as if listening. The ghost of the Luftwaffe no longer haunted the skies. It had been transformed, from a weapon of war into a teacher of generations. The years rolled forward, and with them, the shadows of the Me-262 stretched across continents. By the early 1950s, the world had divided, not by oceans or borders, but by ideology and technology. The Americans built the F-86 Sabre, the Soviets unveiled the MiG-15, and for the first time in human history, air combat became a dance between men and machines that could break the sound barrier. The Me-262 was gone from the skies, but not from the blueprints. Its swept wings, its engine layout, its lessons, all had been absorbed, transformed, refined. The war had ended, but the rivalry it birthed had only just begun. In a quiet hangar in Dayton, Ohio, a single Me-262 sat beneath a tarp, half forgotten. Dust covered its canopy. The metal had dulled, but its form still radiated menace and beauty. It had once been dissected, tested, and flown under American stars. Now, it was waiting, not for war, but for memory. A young Air Force historian, newly assigned to the archives, walked toward the old machine. He had read the reports, Operation Lusty, Project Seahorse, the test flights at Wright Field. But standing before it, the words seemed small. He placed his hand on the cold fuselage and whispered, almost reverently, "So this is where it all began." Behind him, the chief curator, an older woman who had spent decades collecting relics of aviation's past, stepped forward. "You're touching history," she said softly. "And history isn't just about victories. It's about consequences." He nodded. Did they ever realize what they'd started? She smiled faintly. Some did, most didn't. The men who built this jet thought they were winning a war. In truth, they were starting a race, one we're still running. They stood there in silence. The air smelled faintly of oil and time. "Do you know what amazes me most?" the curator said finally. "The Me-262 wasn't perfect. It was fragile, dangerous, ahead of its materials and pilots. But that's why it mattered. It showed us that progress doesn't wait for permission. It happens, ready or not." The historian looked at the battered nose cone, where faded traces of the Luftwaffe cross were barely visible. "And now it's just history," he said quietly. "Not just history," she corrected. "A warning." Years later, 21st century. Decades passed. New aircraft filled the skies, stealth fighters invisible to radar, drones guided by algorithms, hypersonic prototypes that blurred the edge between atmosphere and space. But if you traced their lineage far enough back, through generations of engineers, through sketches and test flights and failures, you would always find one shape at the root. Twin engines, a swept wing, a cockpit set slightly forward. The ghost of the Me-262. At aerospace conferences, engineers still mentioned it in passing, not as Nazi technology, but as the genesis of modern flight. A paradox made of metal. A weapon that ended up shaping peace. And somewhere, in a museum hangar or an airshow in Germany, an old jet occasionally roared back to life, restored by volunteers, flown gently, a whisper from the past echoing through modern skies. When its engines ignited, the crowd fell silent. The whine rose, sharp and mechanical, until the air trembled. And for a brief moment, the future and the past met, just as they had in 1945. The Me-262 lifted its nose, wheels leaving the ground. Not in anger, not in fear, but in remembrance. A reminder that every innovation carries a question. Can we master what we create? As it disappeared into the clouds, the sound faded, but the lesson remained. The Allies had once captured Nazi technology. Now humanity had captured the jet age itself. And the world would never look at the sky the same way again.